Evening. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, or early evening, for being here. Notice is hereby given of a workshop of the Board of Directors of the District to be held at 105 Port Road, Port Isabel, Texas, on the 23rd of May of 2018, at the hour of 4:30 p.m. for consideration of the business of the agenda below. This notice is posted at the office of the District on May 18, 2018, at 1 p.m. in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551-041-551-050. We do have the presence of a quorum. All the board members are present with the exception of Rick Wells, who gave notice that he would not be able to attend today. If I may please have everyone stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this day you've made for us, Lord, to meet and do district business. Just ask you to guide us, Lord, through all the presentations that we have today in both the workshop and the regular board meeting. Our God, we just ask you that you help us understand and that we move forward in doing the district business accordingly, Lord, and to the best that we can. And we thank you again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. We do not have anything on there for open forum or discussion, but this is a workshop. If anyone would like to add or discuss anything before the meeting, welcome to comment beforehand. Okay. Moving to item 3, presentation by Wilden Financial Services on the 2018 water and wastewater rate study and long-term financial plan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Dan Jackson here doing the presentation for us, and hopefully that we get to understand every part of it easily, and looks like a well-done presentation here that you provided for us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be here tonight. As you all are aware, about 3 months ago we hired Wildan, my firm, to do the latest water and wastewater rate study and long-term financial plan for the district. The purpose of the workshop tonight is to present our preliminary results and findings and recommendations for your long-term water and wastewater rate plan. I want to really emphasize that, first of all, these numbers are preliminary. And second of all, this is just a workshop for information purposes only. We're not endorsing any particular alternative. We're just providing the information that you, as the board members, will use in determining what is going to be the best policy for the district. Rate making is a very much a policy-related decision. A lot of people think rate making is financial, and it is a financial decision, but it's also a social, community, and a political decision. Particularly when you make decisions that involve changing rate structures. When you do that, you're going to impact different ratepayers differently. And therefore, you have to decide whether or not the changes that you decide to make are in the best interest of the community and are worth it in terms of the changes that it imposes on these particular customers. It was working a minute ago.
Before you crank up, you mentioned that this is preliminary and the numbers that you have are preliminary, but that does not apply to the number of meters that are in service with preliminary as far as projections. There is some hard data.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I think that's important to point out that the data is hard. The alternatives we're presenting tonight are what we would call the initial alternatives, and we're certainly open to doing additional alternatives if the board directs us to do so tonight. So that's why we would consider the numbers to still be preliminary in nature. There we go. So what I'm going to do is, in my presentation, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about your current rates and how they compare to other communities. Then I'm going to talk about your customers and your volumes, and then I'm going to talk about your cost of service. In other words, how much water are you producing and how much does it cost you to produce that water? I'll then talk about a couple of rate plan alternatives that we're presenting for your review tonight, and then I'll summarize and we'll talk about the next steps. But I always try to start these presentations off by talking a little bit about what's going on in the nation in general with regards to water and wastewater rates. I think that this is very important because the Laguna Madre Water District, like all other districts, are facing a lot of very important challenges with regards to the provision of water and wastewater service. Costs of providing water service are going up. They're going up all across the United States. They're going up all over the world. And districts like yours have to find a way to deal with that. As a matter of fact, the average utility in the United States has been increasing rates 5 to 6% every year over the last decade, and that trend is expected to continue in the future. The American Water Works Association projects that water and sewer rates are going to triple in the next 15 years. That's important to keep in mind because what it tells us is that the challenges you're facing are not unique. They're being faced by everybody in the nation. Now, many utilities, particularly the cities I work for, many cities own their own water and sewer utilities. And what they do is they set rates that are below cost. 30 to 40% of utilities right now have rates in place that don't cover their costs. So what they do is they have their general fund subsidize their water and sewer rates because they recognize that it's a very difficult decision to raise water and sewer rates, and some cities just don't do it. They decide that they're just going to subsidize water and sewer rates. Well, as a famous politician once said, the problem with the subsidy is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money. And that's the problem a lot of cities are facing right now because the more money they use to subsidize their water rates, the less they have for other vital city services. And finally, I think it's very important to note that a lot of the reasons why rates go up are reasons that are beyond the control of a board or a utility. Look, cost of everything goes up by 3% a year just due to inflation. You try to run your water operation like a business. You want the revenues from your rates to cover all the costs of providing that service. And so when costs go up due to factors like inflation, you've got no choice but to pass those costs through to your ultimate ratepayer. And when you look at some of the specific costs of a water operation, things like chemicals, electricity, gasoline, insurance, all of those are going up at rates higher than inflation. And so you have to deal with that as well. And finally, you have to do the capital investment in a system to ensure that it continues to run at a level of it that is acceptable to the community in general. All of those factors are beyond your control, but they all have to be factored into a long-term rate and financial plan. So, speaking of rates, what do people pay? And how do they compare to other communities? That's the purpose of this part of the presentation. I want to start by saying that your rates are very, very competitive. The rates that you charge for your residential customers, your 5/8" rate, are about 40% below the state average right now. You haven't adjusted your rate since 2016, so you've gone a couple of years without a rate adjustment. Most utilities raise their rates just about every year. And finally, you have a rate plan in place that encourages conservation. I think that's a very good thing. Conservation is obviously very good for the community in general. But it also highlights one of the odd things about running a water business. You're in the business of producing a product that you're trying to get your customers not to buy. That's hard, and that factors into the rate structure that you ultimately put in place. So, this is your current water and wastewater rate structure. You charge a rate by meter size. Most of your residential customers are 5/8" meters. They have a combination of a minimum charge and a usage charge per 1,000 gallons. A 5/8" customer pays a base charge of $12.26 for water and $13.46 for wastewater. In that base charge, they get the first 4,000 gallons applied as a credit. They then pay an inverted block rate of $2.47 per 1,000 gallons for between 4,000 and 10,000 gallons. Then the rate goes up to $3.89 for between 10,000 and 20,000 gallons, and then it goes up to $5.55 for 20,000 gallons and above per 1,000 gallons. As you can see, your larger customers with larger meters have the same basic rate structure. Their rates are a little bit higher because their demand on the system is a little bit higher. Yes, sir.
Is there a rate structure there using the 5/8" meter as an example to where the flat rate of up to 4,000 gallons is $12.26, and the next 6,000 gallons is billed at a rate of $2.47?
Right.
Is that rate structure appropriate? Did you find anything not appropriate that? Seems like the more you use, the cheaper it gets.
Well, in a sense, that's true because, but the way base charges used to be, it used to be that you would put all your fixed costs into a base charge. And you see, most of the costs of a water system are fixed. So it used to be that the base charge was real high and then the volume rate was real low. Well, that didn't encourage conservation, so the industry moved away from that. And they decided that base charges would be better if they were lower and just sort of reflected monthly customer costs. And so for that reason, the base charge right now for a 5/8" meter is the equivalent of about $3 per 1,000 gallons. And that includes the cost of the 1,000 gallons itself, plus some customer costs as well. It's a very low base charge, I will tell you that. You could be justified in increasing that base charge.
Would you adjust it on the base charge, or would you adjust it on the other charges, on the higher volume? That's where we get into the policy questions of rate design. You could do it either way. It doesn't really, from a rate-making standpoint, you would be justified in doing it either way. It becomes a question of what do you think is the most just and We're going
reasonable.
to tackle that later. My question really is that, are we in the norm on a state basis? Doing it that way?
Based on my experience, your base charge is actually a little low. Most other communities, base charges $15 to $20 to $25 is pretty standard.
For the final report, we can take some of that information and we can make that decision amongst ourselves if we think that we want to fiddle with the base rate or we want to take and work with the rates above the base rate.
Absolutely.
And we really got to pay attention. Jumping ahead in the report, what jumped out at me is we're underwater in our sewer, wastewater. So we really got to take and tackle that. I don't want to take and mess up your flow here. But, that's what I'm looking at is, that information for me, are we within the norm of the base rate? You said that's low. And then are we in the norm of the higher volumes above the base rate? I would like to get some feedback later on this, if appropriate.
And I will just tell you this, and I can tell you based on my experience doing this for over 200 utilities around the country, my experience is that your base charge is a little bit low and your gallon allowance is actually a little high. 4,000 gallons in the base charge is higher than what you see in most communities. In fact, what you're starting to see more and more is communities not having any gallons in the base charge because they consider that to be more conservation oriented. You see, the way your base charge works right now, you get 4,000 gallons credit whether you use it or not. So your incentive is to use up to 4,000 gallons. In fact, you're already paying for it, so you might as well use it.
You promote usage.
So what you're seeing more and more communities do is do away with the gallon credit in the base charge.
I got a question. Does it, since your fixed costs are on the base charge, would it make sense to work on that instead of the gallon usage?
Well, fixed charges aren't really in the base charge anymore. They used to be back 20, 30 years ago. Because 20, 30 years ago, water utilities would have very high base charges, and then they'd have very low volume rates. And they would put all their fixed costs in the base charge, like all your debt costs and things like that, because they would say, we got to pay debt costs whether we sell 1 gallon of water or 1 billion gallons of water. So we're going to put all the debt charges in your base charge and make sure everybody recovers, make sure the utility recovers all of its debt costs.
So you calculate that?
Right.
Okay.
That
And I
used
guess,
to be done.
okay, that's the way it used to be done.
Right, but the problem with that methodology is that discourages conservation, because it means the volume rate is going to be real low. So people have a great incentive to use more water. If volume rate is only $1 or 50 cents per 1,000 gallons, people are going to use a lot of water. That discourages conservation. So the industry moved away from that. They moved away from trying to recover all base charges or all fixed costs in the base charge. And they said, we'll just let you recover your fixed costs in the volume charge to jack up the volume rate to provide you a financial disincentive to use more water. You see, right now, the way you've got it is you have a real financial disincentive for people to use high amounts of water. The average customer here, the average residential customer, 5/8" meter, only uses about 6,000 gallons a month. So it's very unusual for a residential customer to use more than 20,000 gallons. And it's also there's also a big price disincentive for people to do that. There's no economic saying if you raise the price of something, you get less of it. And that's exactly what you're doing in this rate structure. But it's counterintuitive. It doesn't flow with economics because most costs are fixed. So under pure economic theory, you would put all your fixed costs in the base charge. But if you do that, you're not encouraging conservation. So to encourage conservation, you make the volume rate higher. But that means your fixed costs are being recovered in your volume rate.
And just to be clear, when you're thinking or talking about these fixed costs, now that does not include debt.
It does.
It does.
Yeah, these rates.
So you don't take
cover
into
all the
account
costs.
that the debt's already been paid for through whether you borrowed the money or you did a revenue bond or something like that. So does it make sense to include it in there if you're paying with a revenue bond?
Yes, because your rates have to recover enough revenue each year to pay the principal and interest on your outstanding debt. So these rates do that. And the rate plan that we are projecting tonight does that as well.
You have two. You have revenue bonds and you have property bonds or
Tax
bonds.
So the tax bonds, that would not be something you would
There's two different types
include.
of debt. There are two different types of debt, and they cover two different types of expenses.
So the tax bond would not be included in those fixed costs?
No.
Okay.
Tax bonds are not included in this.
Okay.
Okay. So, what do people actually pay for water and sewer service here in the district? Well, if you're a typical residential user and you use 10,000 gallons a month, which is actually a little above your average, but 10,000 gallons is a pretty standard average that the state of Texas uses to compare water rates. If you use 10,000 gallons a month of water and sewer service, here in the district you're paying $50.10 for that service. As you can see, that's $37 below the state average. The state average for the same amount is $87.58. So your rates for your residential customers are very, very competitive. Furthermore, when you compare to other communities here in the valley, you're also very competitive. This chart right here compares Laguna Madre's rate or monthly charge for 10,000 gallons with other valley communities. As you can see, you're a little higher than some. You're a little higher than Edinburgh and McAllen. You're about the same as San Juan. But you're below Brownsville and Donna and Mercedes and Raymondville, and you're way below Los Fresnos. So, what this chart...
Are these all MUDs? Are they all municipal utility districts? These in comparison?
Actually, most of them are municipalities. Most of them are cities, yeah. They're not... The water district is part of the city operation.
So would it be fair to even compare? Yeah, compare, because you've already said that many of the municipalities already offset their water and sewer.
Right.
With their ad valorem tax and other things. So
right, and it's not necessarily fair.
They don't have the same business model that I'm focusing on right now.
That's
so
right.
It's not a good comparison.
I could not agree more. The problem is ratepayers are going to make that comparison. Because when I do public hearings, it's very common for a ratepayer to come in and say, I have a cousin who lives in San Benito, and he doesn't pay anywhere near as much as we pay. Our water is overpriced because my cousin doesn't pay as much. Well, every individual's water bill depends on how they use water. You know, how much do they use? Do they water their lawn? How many people do they have living in their household? So, comparing one individual's monthly bill to another individual's monthly bill is not fair, but it's done anyway. And the purpose of a chart like this is to show you empirically that your rates compare very favorably to most of the other water utilities. And when you consider the fact that right now your rates are covering your costs, and many utilities' rates are not, I think that puts you at an even greater advantage. Now, I don't know how many, if any, of these utilities are subsidizing their rates. I do work for a few of them. I do work for Los Fresnos. I know that they're not subsidizing. I do work for Mercedes and Donna, and in the past I've done some work for Harlingen, and we did some work for Edinburgh. So, but many of these utilities are standalone.
Has Los Fresnos incurred some extra debt for the upgrades that they're taking and adjusting their base rate today to take care of the infrastructure they spent money on?
Absolutely they are.
So, so again, that's not the same apple to apple that we're talking about now.
It's always risky to try to do rate comparisons. Rate comparisons are not perfect by nature. The only reason I include them is that I know that it is a question that is typically asked in a rate presentation is, how do our rates compare to our neighbors? What your rates are to a great extent, depends on what policy decisions you make. A city can keep its rates very, very low if it doesn't do any capital investment. For example, the city just says, you know, we're not going to invest in our system, we're not going to expand our plants, we're not going to replace our lines, so we're going to keep our rates real low. It's sort of like saying, I can save $100 by not changing the oil in my car. Sure, you can do that, but a year later your engine blows out. So rate, like I said, rate comparisons are not perfect. There's a lot of reasons why rates are different, but I think it's useful to show how your rates compare to other utilities just as a data point.
In your expertise, the slide before that, to where it showed us compared to the state average.
Right.
Would that be more applicable to what we're discussing tonight?
It could be, but the thing is, Texas is a big state. There's a water usage differs significantly throughout the state. I mean, I live in Dallas. Dallas has surface water, and we're running out of surface water. We have to build a new lake. It's going to cost $1 billion to build that lake, called the Bodart Reservoir, and that's going to jack up everybody's rates. It's going to double everybody's rates in the next 5 years. And so, but you know, we live in Texas, and so it's part of that $87 average.
And it's
so
a broader average.
No, I'm not going, but I have another question. What is, if you're just going to use the 5/8, what is the average homeowner pay and taxes and property taxes on that? So you could just kind of divide that into the bill. I guess. I mean, if you could just pull an average home, I mean, what's the average home? 125,000, I guess. System wide for a 5/8 meter holder in taxes. I mean,
Well, Texas for the water district, are we talking just the water district itself, or?
yeah, just water district. Just the taxes alone that they pay on just that, just to try to incorporate that into.
I think mine's under $100 maybe for my
I
property.
don't know that I would be more sympathetic.
That's.
I would want to differentiate those that really use the 5/8 meter on a lower income level and be cognizant that we're not really hurting them, as opposed to, regardless of what their house value is.
I was just trying to just add to the tax dollar what that goes back into this number. If it's only a couple $100 per year and you divide that back into what this is, takes that rate. So what does that put you in comparison to state rate? The true value of what that cost is. What I'm trying to get. An idea. That's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, our property tax is what, about 4 cents per $100 valuation? I don't know if you could do a quick calc.
Okay, so $400 a year per 100,000. So what is the average valuation, I guess? And I'm just using a 5/8, just as a one example, not to try to add that back into what that number is to compare to the state of Texas, because that's really the true number, isn't it? I mean, I would say you have to add that number back in there, whether you're a homeowner or a renter.
Yes, but many cities do it. Many cities pay for part of their water and sewer systems and tax funds as well. So every city is different.
Okay.
And that's why it's inherently problematic to do rate comparisons, but we do them because people want to see it. They want to see how their rates compare. And while the comparison is not perfect, I think by any stretch of the imagination, if you look at a chart like this, you say, our rates are certainly not out of proportion to what other people are paying for water service. Do they compare exactly? No, maybe not. There are a lot of extenuating circumstances. But to those who may believe that your rates are disproportionately high, there's no evidence to support that.
Okay, we'll go from there. Yeah, we're not over.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about your customers and your volumes. This is a long-term forecast that we've done. Our rate study is a 10-year forecast, and we're going to present a 5-year rate plan to you. Rate plans and forecasts are not guarantees. They're predictions based on a series of reasonable assumptions. One of the key assumptions is what kind of growth do you anticipate having here in the district in the coming years. This chart right here shows that you've had some pretty healthy account growth in the last 4 years. You had 6,497 accounts in 2015. That's increased to about 6,781 accounts And we're projecting that you're going to increase at a fairly moderate level, about 50 or so accounts per year. We talked about this fairly extensively with staff. Obviously, things can change very rapidly. Growth numbers can change very, very rapidly, but we're taking a very conservative approach in terms of the addition of additional accounts in the coming years. This chart right here is a chart of your water usage. What's interesting about this chart is that it shows that in 2005, you had water. This is consumed water. This is not produced water. It's water you sold. You sold 1.1 billion gallons of water in 2005. Your peak year was 2011. You recall it was a drought year, a very, very hot year. And in that year, you sold 1.5 billion gallons, and your usage has actually been declining since then. This year, you're projected to sell 1.26 billion gallons of water, and that number is expected to nominally increase over the next 10 years. Now, in reality, as you can see, the projection shows pretty constant growth. In reality, the growth is probably going to be something like this. It's going to be higher in some years and lower in other years, just simply due to weather. You know, wetter years, the number's going to go down. Drier years, the number's going to go up. But over the long run, we think it's going to increase very nominally in the next decade. Now, this chart right here shows that the inverted block rate schedule that you put into effect has been very successful at getting people to minimize water usage. This is a chart that shows for 5/8 inch meters only the average monthly consumption per unit, per account, per month. Back in 2001, the average customer used about 8,000 gallons a month. And that number was fairly consistent over the 10 years. As you can see, it rose a little bit to 8,790 gallons. In the drought year, it spiked up to 11,000 gallons. But as you can see, in the most recent years, your average usage has fallen fairly dramatically. So what that's telling us is that people are using water much more expeditiously now than they have been in the past. The average usage in the state of Texas used to be about 10,000 to 11,000 gallons a month. All across the state, it's fallen. It's only about 8,000 to 9,000 gallons, and it's fallen even further here in the district. So I think you should be commended for the fact that people are using water very, very wisely here in the district. And that matters because, like I said earlier, you're in the business of selling a product that you're trying to get people not to buy. And when people don't buy it, that's a good thing for the community, but it's not necessarily a good thing for the district. And the district has to deal with that in its long-term financial planning. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your cost of service. I want to make a very important observation right up front. Your fund balance is in very sound condition right now. You as a board have made some very difficult decisions in the last decade. You've done several rate adjustments. I know they weren't popular. I know that nobody wants to pay more for anything at any time for any reason. But the decisions you made to adjust your rates have resulted in you having a fund balance that is sound and is healthy, and your rates are right now covering all of your costs. However, that being said, right now your water costs are recovering a little bit more than the costs, and your wastewater rates are recovering a little bit less. So what you're seeing is your water rates are carrying your wastewater rates a little bit right now. This is not uncommon. I would say in the vast majority of utilities that I work for, water costs tend to carry wastewater a little bit. And look, you know, in a perfect world, you want water to cover all water costs and wastewater to cover all wastewater costs. But you know what? We don't live in a perfect world. We live in an imperfect world. And sometimes your water rates are a little higher and your water rates are a little bit lower because what happens is your wastewater costs increase at a higher rate than what your rate increases have been. But for the vast majority of customers, it doesn't really matter that much because, you know, they pay a water bill and a wastewater bill. So maybe on their water side they're paying a little more, and maybe on their wastewater side they're paying a little bit less. So while it's not what I would consider to be a real big deal, at the same time, the long-term plans that we recommend to you will result in water covering water and wastewater covering wastewater.
Then when you're bringing that plan to us, take in consideration the infrastructure needs that we're trying to tackle and address. We're able to take lose money on the wastewater side, make it up on the water side, treatment side. But bottom line is our infrastructure is not as good a shape as it needs to be. It needs to be on the wastewater side. And so we're struggling with the funding for that.
Yes.
So we can't we need to be more perfect from that. My standpoint, we need to be more perfect in the sense that we can't be losing water and wastewater, or losing money on wastewater, and not have that profit, if you will, to replace our infrastructure that needs to be upgraded badly.
I think that's a very sound point.
It's not balanced.
No. Well, it's on a today balance sheet, but it's not taking into consideration what we're struggling with, and that's replacement cost and a maintenance fund line item that we can use for taking care of our infrastructure.
Pay now or pay more later.
Well, that's what's happened, and now we're having to pay more on the wastewater side particularly. Y'all did a great job of taking care of the water treatment. New plans are going to be really got us up into a great position, but now the wastewater side of it really needs attention, money spent on it.
Right. And I think there are many utilities out there that have the philosophy that, look, if wastewater costs go up at a higher rate, and yours are, we should adjust wastewater rates more aggressively to ensure that people pay what it's costing us to serve. Remember, you're a nonprofit entity. So in the long run, what you want is people to pay what it is costing you. And so, as I said, the both alternative rate plans that we present to you tonight will result within a couple of years of water paying for water and wastewater paying for wastewater. And as a preview, the wastewater rate adjustments are going to be higher than the water rate adjustments. This is your water and wastewater fund in the current year. Your cost of service is composed of three elements: operating expenses, capital outlays, and debt service. Operating expenses are personnel and pencils and gasoline and chemicals and all the other day-to-day costs of running a water system. Capital outlays are small ticket capital expenditures, things like big capital expenditures that you would not issue debt for. For example, buying a new truck. I mean, you don't sell a bond to buy a truck. You just buy it, but it is a capital expenditure, and that's called a capital outlay. And then debt service is the principal and interest you pay on the long-term debt that you have to pay for your system improvements. As you can see, in the current year, your water rate revenues are projected to be $5.4 million, and your cost is $4.2 million, so your net revenues is positive by about $1.1 million. But your wastewater net revenues are negative by about $890,000. The bottom line is your fund in general is covering all of its costs, but as you can see here, water is carrying wastewater a little bit. Now this chart right here shows what would happen over the next 10 years if you did not do any rate adjustments at all. Because one question that's typically asked in a forum like this is, well, what if we don't do anything? What if we just leave our rates unchanged right now? Well, your revenues will go up a little bit over the next 10 years because you're going to have some system growth. As more connections come in, that's more minimum charges. So the blue line here shows your revenues going up. But as you can see, your costs are going to go up at a greater rate. And one of the main reasons for that is that you've got to issue some additional debt, which you're in the process of doing right now, to pay for your long-term capital improvements. So right now, your revenues are covering your costs. But without doing a new long-term financial plan, very quickly, your revenues in general are going to recover less than their costs. So, what are some of our assumptions for increases in the future? Well, we're assuming that most of your costs are going to go up by 3 to 4% a year just due to inflation. Our model also projects that some of your costs, like electricity and chemicals, are going to go up at higher rates. And based on some fairly extensive discussions with staff, we put in a couple of estimates for adding a couple of new wastewater treatment plant personnel over the next 10 years. That's not a real material impact, but it's something that should be reflected in any financial plan.
So staff was more concerned about adding a couple of people rather than taking and doing the system upgrade?
No, not at all. It's just part of the overall plan. But an overall financial plan should include what we think our operating cost increases are going to be and what we think our capital cost
I understand
increases
that pretty well. I'm just kind of like aghast that, they thought we're going to increase it by a couple of personnel, but at the same time, when we're buried under a mountain of need for infrastructure improvement.
Well, the thing is, the interesting thing is when you expand a treatment plant.
Never mind that, that's my own.
Okay, but, yeah, the plan, again, the operating costs are gonna continue to go up, and, you know, at least this financial plan right now includes the assumption that you are going to have to add a couple more people. As your system grows, it's natural to expect that you're gonna have to add more people in the coming years. But the key impact here is gonna be your long-term capital plan. This chart right here shows that the district is forecast to have to spend about $18 million in capital improvements over the next 5 years. That's your plan. Now, that includes about $6 million in water costs and about $12 million in wastewater costs. How you fund your capital improvement plan is one of the most important drivers of your long-term rate plan. Because you see, capital plans impact rates in 3 ways. How much do you have to spend? When do you have to spend it? And how do you finance it? Those 3 factors will go into what your ultimate rate plan is going to be.
Those numbers, those projections came from staff?
Yes, that's correct. And, I'm just a financial guy, and so
Yeah,
it's
that's my
important.
question. Thank you.
So, what are the assumptions for how much you're going to have to fund? Well, the plan assumes that you go through with your $5 million wastewater bond in the current year, along with the $2.5 million water bond next year. It also assumes that you issue a $3 million wastewater-related bond in the year 2020. Now, you got $18 million in capital needs. This is only $8 million in funding. The other $10 million, much of it can come from some of your reserves, but that's a decision you would ultimately make. Because how you fund long-term capital improvements is going to impact your rates. How do you want to do it? Do you want to draw down some of your fund balance, or do you want to issue additional debt? For the purposes of this analysis, we're assuming that you make the decision to issue a total of about $10.5 million in long-term debt over the next 5 years. So how does that impact your cost of service? This chart right here projects your water and wastewater cost of service for the next 5 years. Let's take a look at these numbers. Your operating expenses and your capital outlays are expected to go up by about $500,000 to $600,000 each year. A little more some years, a little less other years. Natural to assume, cost of everything goes up by 3% a year, so most of your operating costs are going to go up. But look at your debt service. Your debt service basically doubles over the next couple of years. You've got about $900,000 in debt right now. As you issue the new $5 million bond and then the $2.5 million bond, that's going to increase your debt service to about $1.7 million. So what this tells us is that our total cost of service is going to go from $8.7 million to $11 million. So the biggest driver is it's a $2.5 million impact, $2.5 million increase over the next 5 years. $1.5 million of it is about $1 million of it is nothing more than debt service. So how you fund the debt service and your operating costs is what is going to drive the determination of what your long-term rate plan is going to be.
Did staff mention anything about our unfunded obligation with the retirement program? We're really underwater there. And when we're talking about our fund balance, fund availability out of our reserves, we're trying to struggle to catch that up by matching funds and actually catch it up on paid matching funds. So we've got to consider that in our revenue structure if we're ever going to get the overall risk reduction.
Would somebody tell the people in the hallway, I'd rather listen to this gentleman up here instead of them out there?
Can't close the door.
No, for me.
Yeah, close the door.
Tell them shut up.
Yeah, I'll go.
Anyway, when we're looking at it, my point is, I'd like to look at all of the unfunded and the programs that we're going to have. The real thing, the whole enchilada.
Yeah.
We need to look at, so we need to include that in there. If we're going to generate the income to get the district to be up to a solvent position, we've got to consider that in our rate structure.
Yeah, And part of the purposes of this workshop is to discuss some of these assumptions with you and to make adjustments as we see the need to do so. If you instruct us that, for example, if you look at these debt numbers and you say, well, we don't think that's enough debt, we think we're going to have to issue more debt, we can build that into the plan and revise the rates
I
accordingly.
don't necessarily think issue more debt, but from the revenue side, we have to do our rate structure that's gonna take and generate the revenue that we can pay our debt, including our unfunded obligation of the debt without a bond indebtedness. So I feel that we need to look at everything, including that.
Okay.
And I for one would very much, it's not in your study, but I for one would very much like to have the revenues that we're discussing go to line items of specific debt repayment as we generate this income, instead of just generating more money and say, oh, well, we have more money, let's buy more stuff.
For example, the
Meter system, our
system.
debt service, our unfunded mandates, with retirement and things like that.
I understand. Okay? Well, let's talk about, we've talked about our growth, and we've talked about the increases in costs over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's now talk about our rate plan alternatives. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, rate making is much more than just a financial decision. It's a social, community, and policy decision as well. And so those factors go just as much into an ultimate rate plan as the financial piece of it goes into. You see, the policy decisions that you make and the objectives that you want to accomplish are really going to drive what the ultimate rate plan is going to be. I could give you 100 different rate plans that'll get you the revenues that you need to cover your costs. The question is, what do you think is the most fair, just, and reasonable plan? Well, that's a decision the policymakers make. We had a lot of discussions with staff, and they asked me for my advice on what I thought would be appropriate or reasonable alternatives. And as a result of that, we're going to present to you a couple of different alternatives. The first alternative rate plan we're going to present to you is what I call the status quo. What it does is it assumes that you make no significant changes in the rate structure that you have. You continue to charge by meter size, you continue to charge your inverter block rate, and you just do a series of increases over each of the next 5 years to meet your increased operating costs. The second alternative...
That's the status quo, that's no growth, that's no real significant debt repayment.
No, it is debt repayment. It does include growth. It includes modest growth.
3%.
Yeah.
Grow your rates 3%.
3%, but that's just keeping up with the cost of.
No. Yeah, it's more than 3% because you've got the new debt that you have to pay for. So that increases your overall cost by more than 3%. So the status quo gets you all the revenues that you need over the next 5 years. The second alternative is what we call the multifamily alternative. And that, again, was based in part on the original presentation that I gave at the beginning of this rate study and the original feedback I got from all of you regarding what you wanted to see in terms of an alternative rate plan. Under this alternative, this reclassifies your multifamily customers. What it does is it looks at every account that is a multifamily account and presents them into a separate rate class where you charge a minimum charge for each unit. Let's say you have a condo complex that has 20 units in it. You would charge that condo complex 20 minimum charges at the residential rate, and then you would give them 24,000 gallon credits. And then the objective of that is to try to treat the multifamily customers more like a residential customer. That is a change in your rate structure, and we'll go through what the impact of that would be. I really want to emphasize that these are alternatives presented for information purposes only. It's not a recommendation, it's not an endorsement. It's just basically saying, here are the impacts of these two alternative rate plans. So, let's go through the first alternative. I'm first going to show you the rates, and then I'll show you the more important chart, and that is the impact on average ratepayers. Under alternative one, the status quo, we would recommend that you do a series of phased-in rate adjustments on your water and sewer customers. This is your current rate structure for each of your meter sizes. We would recommend doing a modest rate adjustment for your 5/8-inch meters, taking your base charge from $12.26 to $12.51, in the first year with equivalent adjustments in each of the next 4 years. That's about 2% adjustment, if my math is right, on the water side. And as you can see, you would do a series of phased adjustments on the usage charge as well. Same thing with each of the other meters. It would be the same basic percentage adjustment on the water side. The wastewater increases would have to be a little bit higher in order to phase out the subsidy that water is providing to wastewater right now. Your wastewater minimum charge is $13.46. We would recommend taking that to $16.15, effective in October of 2018, with automatic adjustments to $18.57 in October 2019, $20.43 in October 20, and $21.05 in October of 2021. In October of each year, the rate adjustments would go automatically into effect. As you can see, the volumetric rates would go up by a similar percentage each year. Now, that's a lot of numbers. The question people ask is, what impact does this have on a monthly bill? And that's what this chart is intended to show you. Let's say you're a 5/8" residential customer, typical residential customer. The average customer here in the district uses about 6,000 gallons a month. So if you're a 5,000-gallon user of water and sewer service, right now you're paying $30.24. Under this plan, your monthly bill would go up by $3.09 in October of 2018, from $30.24 to $33.32. It would go up by a similar amount in October of 2019. It would go up by $2.03 in October 2020. It would go up by $1.17 in October 21. If you're a 10,000-gallon user, right now you pay $52.83. Under this plan, your bill would go up by $5.18 in the first year per month. It would go up by $5.47 in October of 2019, and then $3.42 in October of 2020, and $1.94 in 2021. Now, since the average usage is 6,000 gallons a month, the vast majority of your 5/8" meters are going to be 10,000 gallons or less. You've got some customers, some residential customers that use more than 10,000 gallons. Obviously you do, but you don't have that many. And so I'm always reluctant to try to take these very big, complex financial plans and try to summarize it in terms of 1 or 2 numbers. So I don't like to do that, but if I did, I would tell you that for the vast majority of your residential customers, the impact of this plan would be an adjustment of $3 to $5 a month in the first year, and $3 to $5 in the second year, and $2 to $3 per month each year after that.
And I'll ask again, those numbers are based on our current debt service and our projected debt service.
And your projected debt service, that's
and
correct.
Projected debt service and our projected nominal increase of 35% a year of
That's correct.
operating costs.
This allows you to fund all of your increases in operating costs and $10.5 million of new
What
debt.
was identified by staff as far as water side and wastewater treatment side, but not necessarily the other points that I brought, or point I brought up of our unfunded obligation.
I don't believe that it goes in, I haven't looked at
He
the
does not
unfunded.
have that, I know.
No,
he
you
does not
don't.
have that.
So
Yeah.
my individual preference would be that staff give you the ugly part of it, of what we really need to have for meeting our obligation. And then we can adjust that on our upcoming thing. The numbers are great, I understand them very well. I just want to make sure that we're considering that, we don't lock ourselves in per se to just this.
Sure.
But come up with a percentage that we need to catch us up.
If I may say, the $18 million that he's getting is a super high-end wish list. So if you drop it to realistic numbers, probably about $10 to $12 million of adding in infrastructure, and probably about a $3 million unfunded. So I mean, you have to kind of blend them at the two.
Yeah, but there was things that we tried to do in the last bond that didn't pass, but those things are still needed for our infrastructure improvement.
Right.
So we're going to have to do them soon. And we're talking about some other issues that we have to correct to bring the system up.
I'm not taking it aside, I was just kind of explaining it, it's super high.
I agree, and I agree. I still would like for staff to give the real dark number of what we're having.
Those have to come from the financial advisor. Those numbers come from the financial advisor, not from staff. That's
Well, it would be staff, but staff knows not only from financial.
We have the
advisor, but-
information available.
But
we
the other
provide
thing
it.
that we need to catch us up on everything.
Right.
Enough on that, we're running out of time, I don't want to cut you off.
Okay, so, for a 1-inch meter, the average usage for 1-inch meters is about 25,000 gallons. As you can see, right now they pay $152.26 for that service. Under this plan, your average bill would go up by about $14 to $15 a month each of the next 2 years, about $9 a month in the third year, and about $5 a month in the fourth year. And then I included some additional examples for your 2-inch meters, your 4-inch meters, and your 6-inch meters. Basically, it's a series of staged rate adjustments for each customer. The percentage increase is about equivalent for each of the different meter sizes. But this alternative one rate plan enables you to fund everything other than the unfunded mandates at this time. Now let's talk about alternative 2. That's the multifamily rate. Again, as I said earlier, the multifamily rate reclassifies the condos, apartments, and multifamily units and trailer parks into a separate class. Each unit within the account is charged a base fee for water and wastewater, and they get a 4,000 gallon credit. Then, whatever volume amounts are left over are charged at the 5/8-inch volumetric rate. Starts out at $3 and then goes up to $4 and then $5.50. The intent or the idea is to treat all multifamily customers as the equivalent of residential customers. Now, so let's go through some of the background of this, because this is you've got a lot of multifamily customers here. At this time, the district has about 211 multifamily accounts right now. 50% of these accounts have 10 units or less. Okay? So you've got some very big condo complexes, but you have a lot of very small apartment and condo complexes. 80% of the complexes have an average usage per unit of 4,000 gallons a month or less. Some of your complexes have multiple meters. You might have a complex that has like 3 meters on it. That complicates the conversion to a per unit rate. It doesn't make it impossible, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult. I want to compliment Minnie for the great job that she did in compiling all this data. I know she was very, very hard on it, very long on it. But the data that she has and the data that we have right now, I would still classify that as preliminary. So if you go through and you decide to adopt a multifamily rate, I would strongly recommend that you do a comprehensive audit of all of your multifamily accounts to the point where you actually get an agreement from each condo complex of how many units they have. You'd be surprised at how many condo complexes are going to dispute the amount of units that they have. I've seen it before, and you would think it'd be pretty straightforward, but what would be really ideal is that you go to each condo complex, you get them to sign something that says, I hereby attest that we have 15 units in our complex, or something along those lines. But what I'm telling you is that if you go through with a multifamily rate, it will be very important for you if you make sure that you have a precise identification of each multifamily unit. Okay, this chart right here shows the average number of units per account. As you can see, you have 211 total accounts. 50 of your accounts are 1 to 5 units. 51 accounts are 6 to 10 units. So 101 of your 211 accounts are 10 units or less. You have 46 units that have between 11 and 25 units in it. And as you can see, you only have about 10 accounts that have more than 100 units, but those are big, big units. Those are big water users. This chart right here shows the average number of gallons per unit per month. 80% of these complexes have per unit averages of 4,000 gallons or less. As you can see, of the 211 accounts, 18 of them average 1,000 gallons or less. 41 units average 2,000 gallons. 39 average 3,000 gallons, and 71 average 4,000 gallons. So between all of that, that's about 160, 170 of the total units. This is the reason why I went through these charts. This is what's important about this. is that if you go to a multifamily unit rate, it's going to impact every unit differently based on how they use water. Now, how is it going to impact? The key factor is the average usage per unit. And this is the rule of thumb. If you're in a complex that has an average usage per unit of only 1,000 gallons or 2,000 gallons, if you go to a multifamily rate, you're going to see your monthly bill go way up. The reason is that what you're doing is you're imposing a minimum charge for every condo complex of 4,000 gallons. And they're only using 1,000 to 2,000 gallons, so they're basically paying more. And their bill goes way up. If a complex uses 3,000 to 4,000 gallons, it'll go up a little bit, or it might be kind of a wash. But if they're a big water user, if they're a complex that uses more than 5,000 gallons, their monthly bill is actually going to go down. Now you might say, how in the world did that happen? It sounds a little counterintuitive. This is what happens. Let's say you've got a condo complex out there that has an average of 8,000 gallons, okay? Well, what you're doing is you are transferring. If they're using 8,000 gallons per unit, they're paying for the majority of their water in the highest rate block, $6 to $7 per 1,000 gallons, because that's what your inverted block is charging them, that unit. But if you're converting all of them to minimum charges, the effective minimum charge is only $3 per 1,000 gallons, because it's $12 for 4,000 gallons. So what you're doing is, for the high volume users, you're moving high cost water down to low cost water.
You're just spreading it out.
Huh?
You're just spreading it out, basically.
Like I said, when you fundamentally change a rate structure, like what you're doing, you're going to impact different people differently based on how they use water. And I'm not saying that I do not advocate one position over another. I'm just here for information purposes. But that is what the impact is going to be.
The catch is there, you emphasize that you really need to ascertain the actual numbers for multi-family units in that main meter tap.
Right.
To verify that.
Yes, and that's a critical component.
Yeah.
I have no reason to believe that a comprehensive audit will result in numbers that are materially different from what Minnie has provided us. But I think it would be important to take that step to ensure that before you implement a new rate structure like this. Yeah, they might, yeah. They could have that data.
Question, that does not apply to hotels.
No, it doesn't, but it could. I don't typically see that, but I have seen it.
Yeah.
But the hotels will be mad as a hatter if you do that, though. Because this is what they're going to do. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, 4 months of the year, our hotel's practically empty. Why are you charging me a per room rate if my hotel isn't occupied? The answer to that is that you're making water available for them to use, whether they use it or not, and you have no idea whether they're full or not.
Also, the infrastructure is the same to get the water to them and have it available for them.
Absolutely right.
We have condos that are occupied a week a year.
Right.
So there's no sense to me that we can't recover our cost of having that water, the cost of being able to turn that tap on whenever they want. There's a incurred cost to us.
Yes.
To do that.
Absolutely. So I guess the question you need to ask yourselves is, these small users, 1,000 gallons, maybe 2,000 gallons a month, why do they use so little water? Do they use so little water because they're not there, because they're only temporary residents? Or do they use it because they're maybe a low-income family or a fixed-income family or empty nesters that just don't use that much water? I can't, as much experience as I have with the district, I can't answer that question. I think you're in a much better position to answer that than I am. But to me, that is a key component of whether you decide that this is the best policy for the district. Why are these little users using so little water?
Because they're not there.
Right? A fair point. But this is the deal. This chart right here shows that you have 211 counts. So you've got all kinds of different multifamily users. You've got you've got small complexes that don't use much water, you've got small complexes that use a lot of water, you've got large complexes that don't use much water, and so on and so forth. So what I did here is, in this chart, I showed you a couple of examples. If you're a 5-unit complex, and you're only using 1,000 gallons a month, your bill is going to more than double under this plan. If you use 4,000 gallons a month, your bill will go up a little bit, but no more than anybody else. But as you can see, if you're a big water user, your bill actually goes down by 10, 11%. And the same thing is true for everybody. The number of units isn't that important. It's the usage per unit. That's the key number. The more you use, the more you benefit from, or the lower your bill is under a multifamily rate.
But still, even on the 1,000 use, is 171% increase.
Right.
But yet, what we're talking about, $25.
It's not very much. No, it's not.
Very much.
Look, a 5-unit complex that uses that only uses 1,000 gallons per month, that's 5,000 gallons, that's $20 a month. So yes, that's why I don't like percentages. Percentages sound a lot scarier than actual numbers. It's a 100% increase, but it's a $20 increase. So I mean, yeah, that's another factor to take into consideration.
It's a little after 5:30, we have the regular meeting. Can we keep going with this? Even though we don't have, nothing's changed out here.
We've done it before, that
Yeah, I
we
know.
extended a little longer.
Call the meeting
I'm-
to order.
I
it.
only have a couple of charts left.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
We would call this,
Yeah,
finish
go
this
ahead.
up?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there's one other factor though, and that is, based on our analysis, the high volume users are going to benefit more than the low volume users are going to pay more. And so if you convert from a multifamily rate, your total revenues are actually going to go down by about $500,000. And I was very surprised by that, but you've got some big condo unit users here on this island. And so if, it's a combination of, you've got some units that are very large who use a lot of water, and their bills are going to go down. And so what that means is that the district would lose about $400,000 to $500,000 in revenue. And so if you implement this multifamily rate, you're going to have to do a slightly larger increase on your other customers to make up the difference. So this is the impact. Again, what it's showing is that for your 5/8-inch meters, your rate adjustments have to be a little bit higher each year than they were under Alternative 1. Same thing true with all of the other meters. And then, of course, you've got your new multifamily rate here as well. The same thing is true on the wastewater side. The impact for your customers is that it would mean that for a 5/8-inch meter, instead of about a $3 to $5 a month increase, it would be about a $4 to $7 a month increase under Alternative 2. The reason, once again, is that the conversion to the multifamily rate actually means your revenues go down a little bit, because those who benefit from the multifamily rate benefit a little bit more than those who pay a little bit more. So the only way you could fix that is if, say, for example, you reduce the gallon allowance in the multifamily rate. Instead of giving them 4,000 gallons, you only give them 2,000 gallons. But then you're not quite treating them the same way as a residential customer. So it's sort of a trade-off. So as you can see, that's why that's why some people say that rate making is sort of like making sausage. It's very difficult to do, and there's a lot of factors that are not financial that go into the decision. To summarize, let's look at Alternative 2. What are the benefits and what are the challenges of implementing a multifamily rate? I would say the biggest benefit of implementing a multifamily rate is that it does treat your multifamily customers the same as your residential customers, for better or for worse. Because your small unit multifamily customers right now are actually paying less than a residence does. It also has another benefit. It converts more of your revenue to minimum charges, which is guaranteed revenue. And so it makes your revenues a little bit more guaranteed. But the challenges are that, look, some complexes are going to see big increases. They're not going to be happy about it. They're probably going to let you know that they're not happy about it. And so you have to understand what the ramifications of putting this policy in place are. And you have to be prepared to answer them and tell them, well, you were paying an unreasonably low rate before, and this is what treating you the same as a residential customer results in you doing. The other disadvantage or challenge of an alternative two is that it means that your rate adjustments for your non-multifamily customers have to be a little bit higher because to make up the lost revenue. And finally, the other challenge is that implementing the multifamily rate is going to take some effort. You know, going out there and verifying every condo complex, that's going to take staff effort.
Would the multifamily condo complex or unit also include multi-businesses that are in the same complex? We have several businesses that have different businesses within the same location, and they're all under one meter.
Well, that's not typically how it's done if it's a business account, and if it's not residential.
We have little units, we have large units that have several businesses within the same complex.
Paying on the usage is
But
the key.
they're paying on the usage, but they all have bathrooms, they all have their own individual services.
Mm-hmm. The idea behind the multifamily rate is to treat a multifamily customer the same as a residential. So you would confine the multifamily rate to only residential communities.
I don't want to bog us down with that question right now, we'll tackle it later, but that's something we need to talk to.
Absolutely. So, final two charts, your raw water rate recommendation, we would recommend you setting it at 66 cents per 1,000 gallons, with it going up nominally over each of the next 4 years. That rate is actually down a little bit because of the fact that water treatment plant number 1 has been down for quite some time. So if you resurrect a reclamation project or another kind of alternative water source project, this rate will go way up.
Let me ask you something in
Sure.
regards to that. You say that the rate reflects just the raw water transportation cost.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Why would we sell anything at cost?
That's a very good question. I mean, you certainly, rate making would give you the right to charge a rate of return.
Well, I mean, we don't,
Mm-hmm.
anybody else that buys water from you,
Mm-hmm.
we don't sell it to them at cost.
So that's an accurate rate right now that we need to take in our consideration or
Sure.
our rate study.
Mm-hmm. You could, I mean, you certainly have you would have the right under rate making methodology to do that.
I don't know, we don't need to bog your report down, just as you there, that's something we need to have a conversation
Sure.
about.
But he labeled it as a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you recommending we sell it at cost?
I'm recommending that if you sell it at cost, that's what your cost-based rate would be. And again, I'm not trying to play word games here, I'm just telling you
got
that.
that number from staff,
I did not want to be presumptuous enough to assume that you would want to make a profit off of the rate or to increase your costs. I would not. However, if you instruct me to do so, I would be more than happy to do so.
I don't think we need to bog.
That's a
down.
policy
That's
decision.
something you got from staff, that number, I think you got from staff,
Correct.
but I want to make sure it's not just the cost, but it also covers future costs of maintaining the infrastructure to provide that raw water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we need to deal with separately.
Okay. So, to my final chart. Look, there's an awful lot for you to chew over. This is one of the reasons why we wanted this to be a workshop setting. No decisions are going to be made. No formal recommendations are going to be endorsed. You've got a lot of information here. You know, the decision that you make with regards to your rate structure will have a lot of ramifications here in the district. It's a policy decision, it's a social decision, it's a community decision as well as a financial one. So what we would suggest you do is you take some time to look over these numbers. If you have follow-up questions, I'm of course available to do that. I'll run a new scenario if you want me to, and then we'll come back at a later designated time after my Alaskan cruise this summer, and come up with
Ouch.
25th year wedding anniversary. I'm sort of obligated.
She's in fire.
Yeah, she is. She's put up with me for 25 years. It's the least I can do for her. And then at that point, we'll come and go over these numbers again, and at that point, you might feel comfortable enough to make a final decision.
Well, you made some recommendations on other rates. I'd like to read your recommendations on raw water.
Okay?
If y'all decide to, an idea or something else that needs to be added, you can email me and I'll send it to you.
Just a note, if I want the dark number, included in whatever, we're doing our rate based on. Including everything that we have to cover for future expansion.
Will the Estrada Hinojosa people be able to come up with that number?
Very positive, yes.
Right, they send it to me, I'll put it right in.
Actually, Valley View is the one that handles that financial.
Yeah, but we have.
Okay.
Anything else in closing? I want to thank Dan for your time, and coming here. Carlos, or we have anything else to add on to this?
Not at this time, I
Okay.
think he's done.
Everyone else will make recommendations, we'll get with Dan. We're gonna have to follow up in another workshop on this, obviously, to decide which route we take, and there's several we can go. And my recommendation is we put this on the fast track, because we do have new meters and a bunch of other things going on, so I would recommend another workshop, hopefully with some more finalized questions.
Hopefully by 2 weeks?
Couple weeks.
Couple weeks?
To
Or-
get moving.
but- Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, would be my recommendation, and it doesn't necessarily be that you have to be here, we could just get some of the answers.
Okay.
That we need to kind of get the direction we're moving forward in.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you
Good.
all.
3-minute break and we'll resume with the regular meeting.